I'm a big fan of rake-free DFS. Your video is oddly locked up. Not on the wait. Oh, but that got weird for a second. All right, you look like a heavily drugged frog for a second because like the tongue was coming out and the eyes were blinking slowly, but your back. Oh, it's getting weird. It's exciting. Okay, no problem. We'll make this work. Yeah, you can be heard just fine. You look good on my screen too. I think it's me moving the window around a little bit was causing stuff, so I'm not gonna touch it anymore. Hands off the window. Yeah, less rake, much better. Very happy. Joy, joy. Hmm. People can't hear you. I can hear you just fine. People couldn't hear anything you just said because you spoke for like 2 minutes, so that would be some truly stellar show we're putting on there. Can you? Okay, so Renpack is muted. Okay, then let's. I don't know why you would be muted because I can hear you. All right. That's pretty amusing that you would have been going there for a minute. Mic auxiliary audio is that. Desktop. No. Just say hi, how are you every couple seconds as I change things, and someone will scream if it comes around.
Can you hear me? Anyone?
Lovely.
Anyone can. Looks like if I'm still on mute.
Okay. Can't hear Renpack. Can't hear Renpack. Funny face. We're good. We're good. Renpack, say something else so we can confirm that we're good here. Then I can figure out why the rankings didn't stick. I think you're good.
Am I good? Hit Slack chat here. Okay, they can hear me now. All right.
All right.
You guys are
Run
good.
your thing for 30 seconds. I'm going back to the rankings to re-upload those, and we will figure out what's.
All right, so excited to be back on Live Before Lock with Fast Eddie here. Today's Live Before Lock is sponsored by Fantasy Draft. If you know about Fantasy Draft by now, I mean, they're the one place where you can play rake-free DFS, and where you can play rake-free DFS also. If you haven't signed up there, use our referral code AWESOMO, and you'll get a 7-day trial free membership. So I highly recommend just signing up tonight, and then or signing up tomorrow morning because the NBA contests have already filled. And you get a chance to play from Monday to Monday, including the NFL slates going forward. It's a place where I've been playing a lot of NBA. I played some NFL earlier in the season. Today's contest already filled. They're Hooters Millions. So there's quite a bit of volume to be played there, and it's rake-free once you can select your different sorts of tiers of membership. And so I highly recommend it. Obviously, you kind of want to save money as you play DFS, and Fantasy Draft does an excellent job of that. What are your thoughts of Fantasy Draft, Eddie, as you finish up your rankings?
I already finished them and put them in. Someone said they weren't there, so I'm trying them again. All right, I re-uploaded the same basic ranking. Someone go ahead and give it a check and see if they're there now. I assume I just somehow got my network framing crossed in some weird way that caused both issues. Yeah, I really enjoy Fantasy Draft as a site. It's not Fantasy Draft. It's the wrong sponsor.
No, it is. I've been Josh has been stand corrected. So it is fantasy draft. I
It is
checked like 5
fantasy
times.
draft.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, our thing says super draft, so we've literally got this twisted all over the place. But I'm so confused. Messages. So yeah, I like fantasy draft quite a bit. There's lots of roster flexibility, which seems to be something that most people like quite extensively. Obviously, paying 1% or a bit less in rake is preferable to paying 10 or 15%, and is again more valuable than anything you or I is going to say on any given day. Most days. There's occasional days that a word out of my mouth might be worth more than 15% against the house, but it's gonna be pretty damn rare. So big fan of the fantasy draft and of some very decent guys. I almost took a job there once, and really righteous dudes, and been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. So reputable as well.
Yeah, definitely. And
Whoa.
today's
I'm gonna try to change the backdrop in the midst of the show. What could possibly go wrong? Hold on to your butts. And maybe we'll talk about basketball.
Something that you guys should make note of today. Our Osmo's rankings are free today. So if you look on our main Twitter handle, Osmo_com, you can find Osmo's rankings. They are free today. So I highly recommend you guys to check them out. They're a great place to start building your lineups and whatnot. And it's something that Alex looks at as he considers his ownerships and lineup builds and how to get unique, as he pretty much takes up all of the lobby on a constant basis. So something I highly recommend taking a look at. And as we get some news right now, we got just news that Mo Wagner will be out today, which is very interesting. So he's been getting quite a bit of run as the backup center to Thomas Bryant. It's going to be something where we can take a look at.
Yeah. Thankfully, though, we don't have to do that until hour 2 of the show. Because that game is not on the early slate, so we should leave it by for our more laid back, the matinee, if you will. For sure. And I enjoy a good matinee.
And
as an old man.
Now, as you have, for all the premium subscribers, Eddie's rankings are up to date and live. So
okay, we pulled it together. So we gotta go a little faster. 4:14. But we've done our intros. We've done our whole thing. So let's get into it. Again, we have a 4-game slate starting at 5 p.m. on DraftKings. We have a 3-game slate starting at 6 p.m. on Fanduel, which includes the late game. Quite a late night hammer it is between the Clippers and the Wizards, but eschewing the 2 earlier 5 p.m. games that make a part of the DraftKings slate. Did you figure that out? I sure as hell didn't, but let's get talking about it. You're the man now, dog. Let's get in there. You got Spurs, Pistons, or Thunder Pellies. Where would you like to go?
Let's start with the Spurs and Pistons side of things. Obviously, we have LaMarcus Aldridge, who has been ruled out, and immediately people have been talking about Rudy Gay, DeMar DeRozan, obviously covering his usage today. And
neither of those are the correct choice, by the way. Go ahead.
And with that being said, Rudy Gay is someone who's popping up in optimizers across the industry, turning out to be a great value play, priced at 4.9. With that being said, let's start with Rudy Gay, Eddie. What are your thoughts with Rudy Gay and Jakob also being inserted in the starting lineup?
I like Jakob much more than I like Rudy Gay, for a couple of reasons. First of all, he's got to play more. I mean, this is a Popovich team. No one has to play more, but they have 3 other guys they can play at the 4. And after Jakob at center, you're on basically Drew Eubanks and out. There are other guys. You can obviously play anyone at the 5 and go super small, but they are playing the Pistons, and there's Andre Drummond out there, and there's an obviously really negative downside. If you go back to the last time these 2 teams played in February of last year, LaMarcus Aldridge was with the team and started and played 30-whatever minutes, and Jakob still started and played 34-odd minutes and change. So I am more comfortable in the minutes for Pirtle. Now, I have Rudy Gay at 30, which, other than the last game, would be the most minutes he's played all year. He played 32 minutes last game, moving into the starting lineup. I thought it was going to stick, and it did stick. They got a win. They got a home win. 2 things that had been very elusive for them, and they beat a very talented Clippers squad. So it's a nice statement win for a team that's trying not to be, quite so the hell awful, and they've been pretty damn bad. So, but he's in there for being a better defender than a number of the other guys in the Trey Lyles, etc. term of things. So I like him a lot. $4,900 is too cheap for a guy playing that much time. I'm not super concerned with the matchup. He'll see a lot of Blake on defense. I'm just fine with Rudy Gay, but again, if it's 35% Rudy Gay or 13% Jakob for $600 less, I will play him. And again, you can just go back to look at that game against the Clippers. Spurs beat their points total expected, won that game by 10, kept the Clippers under 100 points, and I think Rudy Gay had like 17 fantasy points in his 32 minutes. Because again, he's most engaged on the other side of the court. I think Aldridge being out is a huge piece of news, but it's difficult because it's hard to know where to go from there. The no Aldridge bump for DeRozan has been completely absent. DeMar DeRozan has played like 50 games on the Spurs without LaMarcus Aldridge and like 100 games on the Spurs with LaMarcus Aldridge and has basically the exact same numbers. They're not at all different. I think they're slightly worse when Aldridge is out, actually. That doesn't feel right, but it's a pretty significant sample size. Now, these two guys usually on any given game are the only guys to play 30 minutes for this team. They always take 12, 14, 16 shots each. One of them being out feels like it should end up being a relative kick. And again, this is the first game Aldridge has missed this year. I'm almost certain. I'm 99% sure this is the first game LaMarcus Aldridge has missed this year.
I think you're correct.
So again, this is a different team, and there's different things we're looking at. But in a pretty significant sample in the past, this hasn't meant a lot. Now, Spurs aren't on the Fanduel slate, and DeMar DeRozan is way the heck too cheap on DraftKings anyway. $7,300 DeRozan is already a little bit too cheap, or at least already a fair price. So if you think Aldridge being out is worth anything, it makes pretty good play. And the ownership isn't crackers. He's not 60% owned or 50% owned. He's 30, 35% owned, I think, last I looked. So I'm still pretty optimistic of a DeMar DeRozan play. But for reference, it hasn't done a ton. So I do think the bonus for Jakob is very relevant. He's one of two value centers. Well, kind of three value centers on this slate I'm a pretty big fan of on DraftKings. But past that, the Rudy Gay thing is still too cheap. I have him projected for right around 30 fantasy points. $4,900, that feels very good. The ownership is high, but not 55 Mclemore or projected 68 Mclemore or Corey Joseph levels. It's at a tolerable point. So I'm fairly ambivalent on the Spurs, with the exception of probably wanting to come in pretty heavy on Jake Puddle. That's Jake Puddle.
Yeah.
Like literally,
Jake Puddle.
There's no one else to play center, and he's 4,300.
Yeah, that's what I said. His price point at 4,300 makes for, obviously, if you're going to expect him to play around 30 minutes.
I
in this matchup 34 minutes. So with that being said,
I don't know who else they can. I don't know who else they can put out there at center for any appreciable. It's literally Jakob and Drew Eubanks is the backup guy.
That's about
who may
it.
not have played 14 minutes this year. And
I find it really hard Trey Lyles to take advantage, like go up against Andre Drummond in that matchup.
Right, that's the other thing. I don't think Trey Lyles has any center time this year. I could be wrong. I need to look. I haven't seen any. It's been, Chimezie Metu would normally be the backup center to Jake Puddle here, but Metu is out. So literally all that is going to fall down onto Drew Eubanks randomly, who I ranked at the bare minimum as, all it takes is he's a perfectly reasonable fantasy contributor. If you get some foul trouble on Jakob I don't know who else we think they're going to necessarily play at center. You can't play Samanic isn't even with the team. I think he's down with the G League. I was going to bring him up, but he's a 3-4, not a 4-5. I will go back and look because I haven't had time to actually specifically double check this today, but I don't think they have anyone else they want to play a second of center on this team. Rudy Gay at center is not going to fly.
So let's say if, for those who are, the majority of our audience usually builds around 1 to 5 lineups. If you were to play a Spur today, who's the Spur that you're trying to look into? Is it Jakob? If you were to play one Spur in
If
your lineup.
to talk about the number of Spurs I would have in my lineups if I was building 5 lineups, I imagine I would have 3 Pirtle, 2 or 3 DeRozan. I would probably still end up over the field if we have them at like 30-35%. Probably 2. I'd probably, again, I'm rounding to nearest 20 percentages, but it'd be Pirtle. I mean, I have some interest. I probably have 3 Pirtle, 2 Gay, 2 DeRozan, 1 or 2 Derek White, who I actually think is in a decent spot here. You get random bonuses where I ended up ranking fairly high. Derek White, who's only $4,600 and is now, the starting point guard on this team. I think both his minutes and usage tickle up a little bit here. I'm a little.
You do have 9 Spurs ranked, which might be the highest number of players ranked for a 4-game slate I've seen in a long time.
It's gonna be close. I almost guarantee you I have every member of Orlando ranked, so that should be 9. I think I had to rank Mo Bamba. I really don't want to pay $5,000 for 16 minutes of Mo Bamba, but I bet you I ranked all 9 potentially active Magic players. Maybe there's just 8. It's just 8, isn't it?
It's just 8, yeah.
Yeah. The 9th active player today will be Wes Iwundu, who I would not rank and would not play. So that's why. Okay, you got me. Yes. I ranked 9 members of the Spurs, and I ranked them all, reasonably well. So, yeah, I would have some reasonable exposure to the Spurs team. But I think I would end up with like 3 Pirtle, 2 DeRozan, 2 White, 1 or 2 Trey Lyles. He's cheap and the potential for minutes are real there. 1 Patty Mills, 1 Bryn Forbes, 1 DeJounte Murray, something like that. I think that's about everybody.
Let's flip on over to the Pistons side of things, where
sure.
Blake Griffin is now out playing like a load of minutes more.
Much easier. I ranked the starters, I think. No, actually, I ranked 4 of the starters. I didn't rank one of the starters because I know I would have ranked Derrick Rose and he doesn't start. So I think I ranked 4 starters and Derrick Rose and did not rank. I think I took Langston Galloway out at the last second and whomever. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Pistons, where Andre Drummond priced at 9.4, Blake Griffin priced at 8K. Obviously, the Pistons are led by those two. Luke Kennard this year has kind of shown an improvement in his game, trying to show more ownership of the team and been just better on the offensive end of things. Derrick Rose comes off the bench and gets his fair share of usage, priced at 5.4. How do you like Andre Drummond in the matchup with Jakob Poeltl? And going into your head, how has he done in the past? If you've watched any tape or with the history of the Jakob Poeltl and Andre Drummond matchup?
It's not exactly a storied matchup. I remember I remember well the one game from winter to spring of last year, and again, Poeltl's fine. I will download the box score, but I remember thinking Poeltl held his own, and I know he played into the mid 30s in minutes, and my impression off the top of my head would be that he was fine, but it certainly wasn't something where I thought he was going to, limit Andre Drummond in any significant capacity. So how does my database spell Poeltl? P-O umlaut. Okay, that's a bit of a problem. No problem. God, you get those Scandinavian and Eastern European over the letter things. Yeah, and the one game that kept coming to mind, Drummond played 37 minutes. Poeltl played 34 minutes. Drummond had 10, 17, 1, 4, and 1. So 4 steals and a block. Only 10 points. This was late February, so Blake would have been in at that point, but I'll double check that. Poeltl had 11 and 14 with 3 blocks and an assist, which is perfectly equitable. When they played just 2 months before that, I didn't remember this game offhand. Drummond had 19 and 14. With 2 assists, 3 steals, and a block in his 37 minutes. Poeltl started and played 27 minutes in this one. No foul trouble in either game. 7.6 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block in that game in 27 minutes. And that was the 2 Spurs-Pistons games last year, obviously. So, again, both of these games had much more supplemental personnel available for the Spurs. Jakob Poeltl is going to play 36 minutes minus foul trouble. So... I gotta be, pretty optimistic that even if you don't think it's a brilliant spot, and I don't, I would project him somewhere 0.85, 0.9 fantasy points a minute. That's like 32 fantasy points for $4,300. That's pretty good. So yeah, I'm a big fan of 13% own Jake Puddle, and I don't quite know the counter argument. Most guys, there's like, well, this could happen. It's if you don't think he's going to foul out, and again, he had 5 total fouls in 62 minutes, largely against Andre Drummond last year. It seems like it should be a much better play than 12%. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so yeah,
so
Blake Griffin
we were talking about Drummond.
Yeah, so back to
he's close to matchup proof. Pirtle is not such a rebounding machine that it's going to it's a slightly worse than average rebounding matchup, but he's still going to be able to get his. Whenever you have Blake there is the most relevant thing. The matchup is just fine. The pace is just fine. I like Drummond just fine, based largely on the absence of quality pay-up options on this slate. So $9,400 is a average to good price for him. I'm generally a fan of paying it just because, again, the pay-up options are pretty thin. You have $9,200 for Brandon Ingram in an average matchup. That's a price to pay there. You have $9,400 for for Drummond. You have $8,000 for Blake Griffin. That's obviously a number. Pascal Siakam's $8,700 in a bad matchup. Gobert and Donovan Mitchell are $200 astride either side of $800 in not the best spot. So by virtue of I got to spend this money on somebody, yeah, I kind of like Andre Drummond. He got ranked with double A's, but to further contextualize that ranking, and that's something we'll talk about at the top of the next hour, is I have to do a better job speaking in nuances. I'm not like, yes, double A Andre Drummond. I'm like, okay, yeah, Andre Drummond. I like him. I have him for 47 fantasy points, which is a perfectly tolerable number for 9,400. I would, in cash, slightly prefer Drummond, and in tournaments, slightly prefer Brandon Ingram for similar salaries.
Yeah, and Drummond obviously can put up a monster number here. He's shown that time and time again, priced at 9.4.
Yeah.
Blake Griffin did have one good game last year, but that price with like the value at the position is kind of making it tough for me to look at. But he obviously he's slowly getting back into slowly getting back into game shape and whatnot. And he hasn't played a game more than 33 minutes yet. He had one game at 33, but he's hovering around that 32-minute mark. So $8,000 is quite steep for Blake Griffin currently right now with the way things are shaping up. But do you have any final thoughts on the Pistons and Spurs before we move on to the highest total of the night between the Pellies and the Thunder?
Yeah, which this is where there are 4 games on this DraftKings slate. My favorite one is by at least a little bit the one with the lowest over-under. That does not happen a lot. The rest of this team is difficult to get to. The price on Derrick Rose, but it's just having Blake in there and the fact that he ends up being the number 1 usage guy in the team basically sort of mutes everyone a little bit more. Luke Kennard, if he gets back down to like $5,000, I'll start taking shots on Luke Kennard again. But like even when he has a good game, Luke Kennard is giving you 30 or 35. And when that's your ceiling for like $6K, I'm going to look at, there's plenty of players, even on this small slate, who have prices around $6K, who have ceilings of 40, 45, 50 that they can get to, that are pretty unlikely out of Luke Kennard with an all systems go Blake Griffin in there. I still ranked him. It's a 4-game slate. Derrick Rose, again, 5,400. It's a good price for Derrick Rose. Once you get Blake back in there, things get a little squirrely. Bruce Brown Jr. at 4,100 would probably be my next most favorite play. That's really cheap. He should still play 25, 26 minutes. I project him for around 20 fantasy points. But again, really short slate. You can run some Bruce Brown in your life. But that's it. They're both teams are largely healthy. You have Aldridge out for one side, and Detroit is basically entirely healthy at this point. There's Reggie, I guess, is still out. Reggie Jackson. But other than that.
Yep. So we got 30 minutes to go to knock out 3 games. So let's go to OKC in New Orleans, where we got news that Lonzo Ball will be starting and no Kenrich Williams.
Yeah.
And Lonzo Ball is priced at 5.4.
Yep.
And at that price, Lonzo Ball obviously does have an upside, and he's slowly getting back in the game shape after being out with an ankle injury and an illness. Correct? He was out with both in 2 different sparks. 2 different.
We're talking about Lonzo.
Yeah.
Yes, he was both injured, then returned and played. I want to say 3 games, playing 19 to 25 off the bench, and then missed for illness the last few, but is back and starting. I'm a pretty big fan. This is, as you mentioned, the highest over/under of the night. Now, this is the second half of a home-and-home between these two teams. They played Friday. This is the third time they've played this year, so we have some reasonable sample, admittedly, with changing rosters, especially on the New Orleans side. Although Derek Favors will have missed all 3 contests. Yeah, Derek Favors didn't play in any of these. By the way, shout out Derek Favors. His mother passed, so all my hopes and prayers to that good man. I mean, my favorite game, we're going to get to in a minute, is really the Warriors and the Magic. Everyone is just priced much, much better. For all of these teams, with Lonzo coming back, the minutes on a lot of these guys are getting a little more specious, a little more difficult to predict. The prices aren't nearly as attractive, and if they hit that 228 and a half over under, that'll be the first time they got close to that number this year, because in the first 2 games they scored 209 and 219, I think, with the Thunder picking up both of them, by the way. And these are, a couple teams that are, well outside the playoffs at this point. They have 6 and 7 wins respectively, I think. So yeah, Kenrich got hurt on the game on Friday. In the second half, I was kind of disappointed. I was going to be a big fan of Okafor tonight just because NFL Sunday people really wouldn't be paying attention. Okafor started the second half on Friday for Jackson Hayes, purely just as an upgrade, not due to injury. Josh Hart started the second half for Kenny Hustle there. Ingram, Holiday, and Redick being the standard starters there. Now you're going to have Lonzo come in. I assume Hart will go to the bench. I don't know if they've specifically said the rest, but you're going to have Ingram, Holiday, Redick, Lonzo, and Jalil Okafor get the start. Okafor played within a few seconds of 18 minutes in the second half last game, as well as 10 or so in the first half. So he really dominated the time once they got going from Jackson Hayes. So I have him at 32 minutes. I'm a pretty big fan of $4,600 for Jalil Okafor at 32 minutes. He is a pretty good player offensively. He's not very good defensively, but he's better right now on both ends of the court than Jackson Hayes. So while he, compared to, good NBA centers, doesn't rate really, he should have this job. Like that is the correct decision by the staff there. So this is what should happen. It's not a great matchup either way, but I like Jalil Okafor quite a bit. Past that, when you go to look at the rest of the Pelicans here, the over-under has been big, as mentioned in this game, but I think the Pelicans scored exactly 104 points in each of these previous outings, and I kind of like an under bet here, because it's going to be a little sloppier with Lonzo back. I think it's going to be a little slower turning Hart into Lonzo. I think the defense is well better turning Hart into Lonzo. So, Lonzo, I have it 25 minutes. That's not super exciting for $5,400. Can obviously get there, but I think there's some chance of a minute ceiling, which obviously opens up a production ceiling. So I'm fine getting to Lonzo Ball. $8,100 for Drew Holiday. Not the best matchup to me. I like the pieces of Shai Gilgeous you get there. I don't like running into Chris Paul when I can avoid it, but that's fine. Redick, 5.5 for Redick is always going to be fine. But again, the return of Lonzo is just going to shed a few minutes from a lot of these guys. Like, there's only so many minutes to go around. Hart is going to play. You've got to find minutes now for Holiday, Ball, Redick. Each one more is still going to get some run. Maybe Frank Jackson is entirely out of the lineup. Alexander Walker has generally been not playing at all. That probably continues. But, the minutes end up being a little uncertain for everyone outside of... I feel really confident in Holiday and Brandon Ingram. After that, there's not a whole lot of security here. So despite the significant over-under, like 20 points higher than Golden State and Orlando, although I do think that game is actually going to go over and that this game is going to go under, so I think that interval between the two should be a little less. I'm not a massive fan of this game as a point of course there. And then if you look at OKC, just giving you the real quick batch there, I like Gilgeous-Alexander down to 6,600. That makes sense from in a GPP. I would rather go there than Gallinari or Chris Paul at their prices. I think the ceiling is similar to a little bit better, and again, the price is less. None of them are going to be super owned. This is a Pelicans defense that will improve with Lonzo out there in a very relevant way, but still is in that, bottom 5 teams with a 114, 115 defensive rating, which is definitely in the Civ category. I like Dennis Schroeder just fine. I think he got ranked a CA. He's gotten 35-ish to 40 fantasy points each of the 2 previous games this year with the Pellies. Someone here should end up being good, and he's the cheapest of them. Steven Adams. I don't mind playing Steven Adams. It's just that at $5,800, he ranks very similarly to me to Jake Puddle and Jalil Okafor across the ball. And depending on site and slate and 4 games or 5 games or 3 games, is just generally going to be a little worse for me than one of the value guys. Plus, they've really been limiting his minutes in the mid to high 20s now. I think he played 24 in that last game on Friday. He gets 26, 27, 28. All that's fine. 4 game slate, 3 game slate, 5 game slate. Feel free to have some, but as a points per dollar play, he's going to come after all those guys. And Nerlens Noel still very much in play. One of his 6 block game was actually against New Orleans, as I recall. One of these games, Steven Adams missed, and that was the game he started. Only played mid-20s of minutes, but had whatever 40 fantasy points as he is wont to do when he gets those spot starts. Not crazy to see him hitting an upside here, and so he is still ranked. And last man on the rank list, Abdul Adair. They have been talking about Abdul quite a bit recently, and got 22 minutes in the last game, and on a 4-game slate, he's basically ranked in the Ds, but I'd have a share or two. That's that game.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing about Gallinari, he played really well last game against New Orleans in 27 minutes. I do people to look at the box score and obviously get some ownership from that. Steven Adams put up 40 fantasy points in 24 minutes, and Noel also did play 24 minutes as well. So how do you think Adams will match up against Okafor in this matchup? Price at 5.8. Obviously, I don't think he'll be owned as much. And another more important question, I think a key decision point people are going to make for center on DraftKings is the Jakob versus Jalil Okafor. Are you willing to spend up those $300 extra dollars to move up to Okafor rather than Pirtle?
Well, I want to check and see what we have them projected at right now, because
right now ownership projections haven't been updated in some time. So
okay. Well, if anybody's listening, let's get on that. We don't want the wheels coming off the wagon. Our previous ownership for Pirtle was something like 13%, and I think that's probably correct. There's an eminent pay-up center who's now 35-40% ownership in Andre Drummond. There are other value centers, I think, after the show and various other factors. That number will come up, but I imagine you'll have 16-17% there. And I think more people will look and say, Okafor was really good in this last game, and they announced he's starting, and they announced specifically it's to deal with Steven Adams. And he's a guy we know he hits an upside. Jakob Poeltl, most people comes across as an uncertainty. So I do think at the end of the day, you're going to have like 30% Okafor and 15% Poeltl. And at that point, I would prefer to play Jakob Poeltl if those estimates are correct. So, and this is something we'll get into again later, if you agree with that analysis, I would rather play Poeltl. If you think their ownerships are similar, I have to project Okafor for a bit higher. He is a better fantasy player, for want of a better word, but it's not incredibly different for me. Again, I have Poeltl, I think, for 34 minutes in my latest thing, and that's to shed a couple because of potential foul trouble. I really think he should play 36 minutes here. I don't know who else they run at center, and this really isn't a team you can play centerless against. They can try. It's Pop. If anyone can do it, Pop will find a way to play, Patty Mills at center. If someone's going to do it, it's going to be him, but I think plan A would be to get him out there. And again, you can just look at the fact that he saw well over his standard allotment of minutes in both games versus the Pistons last year. And that was with Aldridge in. So I think it's a safe guess that they should really put everything they can on his back. And he's cheaper. And if he's less owned, that makes that pretty easy for me.
Yeah, and also everyone who's watching, if you can make sure to hit that like button. Tomorrow, midnight tonight, we'll be releasing a Cyber Monday deal. So your likes definitely do help us make sure to have these deals for the public and whatnot, and make sure our shows are all free and be able to produce free tools on a daily basis for you guys to try out. So please do hit the like button. We really do appreciate it. Before we move on, Eddie, If you in one lineup, who in this game, who are the two favorite players? Either side works. Like, is there a Pelican that you're very intrigued to roster to make sure
Well, let's see.
Brandon Ingram's
I
price?
have a DraftKings lineup, and it currently has from this game. I have only one player from this game, and it's Jalil Okafor.
Okay, well there you have it. Jalil Okafor is Eddie's favorite play from this game.
Well, that's I wouldn't quite phrase it that way. That's the way this went, but again, I was happy. This game sort of ended up stacking Golden State and Orlando, where I think the guys are priced just a little bit better, and the ownerships are just a little bit better. Yeah, if points per dollar, my favorite play from this game is going to be Jalil Okafor. I'm still guessing on ownership. It's really just pure guesses at this point. I suspect in tournaments, I'd still have very lingering appeal at the same amount for. That's really close. I would have Lonzo and Steven Adams and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Gallinari and Noel all sort of in that same band of, yeah, I'd want to have some of that guy. But I suspect roughly similar to their ownership. So, yeah, no super advantage point that I see as of right now.
All right. With that being said, let's move on to the Orlando Magic and Golden State Warriors game. Where last game, Aaron Gordon did come back, and Steve Clifford mentioned that he wouldn't be ready to play full minutes. He ended up playing 32, coming off of injury.
Yeah.
So, and we did get an ownership update. So we'll refer back to this as we talk about this game. Eddie, let's talk about the Magic and Warriors side of things. The Warriors are just crippled and just not a very good basketball team. And while Orlando Magic have shown John Isaac, Markelle Fultz have both taken strides in their game. Yeah. With that being said, they are playing without Vucevic today.
Yes.
And how does that affect your front court for the Orlando Magic taking on the Warriors?
Yeah, well, they lost Al-Farouq Aminu, being the relevant sort of minutes consideration here. He's got a meniscal tear, which I've had 3 or 4. It's anywhere between a week and 3 months, depending on how bad it is. It's really sort of a random one. Sometimes you just get like some swelling and water on the knee, and sometimes you can't walk. Aaron Gordon's not on the injury report. Again, played 32 minutes in the last game. Wes Iwundu should re-enter the rotation here. I don't think they slimmed down to only 8 players. So Iwundu was out of the rotation last game. I imagine he re-enters the rotation here, plays 16 minutes-ish. No interest in that. But everyone else on this team is priced pretty advantageously. Let me pull up my rankings, which should have the salaries attached. Terrence, all right, so again, it needs to be pointed out that this is a Golden State team that is horrific defensively. The pace is good, and the defense is, again, in those 4 or 5 teams that are all tied for the worst defense in the NBA right now. They're very, very poor, and this is a pretty dense Orlando rotation, and everybody is priced pretty well. Like, the only price on this team I don't look at and go like, yeah, that's too cheap for this spot, is Evan Fournier. Evan Fournier's up to $6,400. That's fine. Doesn't do a ton but shoot. Great matchup, obviously. Great matchup for everybody. I'm fine getting Devin Fournier. But everyone else, I'm like $7,000 for John Isaac. He was just $8,000. This is probably the best possible matchup for him. With his ability to take advantage of turnovers, it would be this or the Hawks. He's exceptional at that. Again, he was just $8,000 on DK not that long ago. I'm a believer in the improvement. That's just a really good price. Markelle Fultz is $5,300. He's playing 28, 29, 30 minutes now. This is a pretty great spot. If you look at his last 4 games, 2 good matchups, 2 bad matchups, every game 24 to 30 fantasy points. Shooting hasn't been that great. I am projected for about 30. 30 for $5,300 is pretty exciting. Khem Birch at $4,700 should start, get mid to high 20s in minutes. That feels pretty good against Golden State. DJ Augustine playable off the bench, and Terrence Ross, $4,300. It's a team that gives up a whole lot of 3-pointers, and that's what he likes to do. So I'm a big fan of getting. My favorite is probably Aaron Gordon. Was he 2 for 11 in that first game back? 2 for 11, 2 for 13, some horrific number. He had 8 points, 8 rebounds, and some supplemental stats. If he plays 32 minutes here, I'm a pretty giant fan. Like, I expect the majority of the offense to come out of Isaac and Gordon, with probably a third note there for Fultz. But against Golden State, 32 minutes of him at 6,000 is just way too cheap. So barring specific reiteration that, yeah, we sort of got carried away with those minutes, we're going to tone that down. I'm a big fan of the Magic, and probably Aaron Gordon being my favorite. Again, depending on what this ownership is, which hopefully I can look at right now.
Aaron Gordon's ownership right now is at 22.1%.
Okay, that's not egregious. I'd have more, probably closer to 30, but that's not an. I actually have him at 18.2, so maybe you and I are looking at something different. Maybe you need a refresh.
Maybe I do need a refresh. I am looking at DraftKings. You are correct, 18.2. I did need a refresh. Yep, so 18.2.
He took a kicky down. So yeah, I would probably be closer to about 30%. I mean, you looked at that last game, he had basically, I want to say, 30 fantasy points in a horrific game, in a bad matchup, but he played 32 minutes against Toronto. The team scored 83 points. He shot 2 for 11. He had 27.5 fantasy points. Like, he's now going from, playing Toronto to playing Golden State, and presumably will make more than 18% of his shots. So, all else being equal, and all else is not equal, you would still expect him to pay off $6K pretty easily. And I'm not super shocked to see 45 or 50 out of him here. It's really wouldn't be that weird of a thing. They don't have anyone to match up with him defensively. They just don't. I mean, they have Draymond, I guess we should say, who maybe we get 24 minutes out of Draymond. Maybe we get 27, they've said, is like the literal high they're looking to put on him. So
true. Let's speaking of Draymond, let's flip on over to the Warriors side of things as we have 12 minutes till lock.
Better go.
Alec Burks, Mr. Chucker on the Warriors, just loves to shoot the ball, and he's in the best possible situation right now before D'Angelo Russell gets back and Jacob Evans gets back. So he got an AA in your rankings. He's priced at 5.8. He's been hovering around that price point for about the last week or so. Is he your favorite Warrior if you were to look to roster a Warrior?
Yeah, it's pretty clearly Burks, then Bowman, and then a conversation. But it's
okay.
It's Burks, then Bowman, and they are ranked as such. I have Burks as a AA. 5,800 is just too cheap. I don't like the matchup, but I do still think backcourts will have a much easier time of it. So I still think you will see some usage funneled that way. So I like pretty clearly Burks, who got AA rankings. I think Kai Bowman got himself a B and an A, which would be appropriate as my next guy. And then after that, I think I got into the rest of the team. Again, I'd have a lot of Orlando, so I can see myself running it back. So I don't mind shares of, probably in order, Pascal, Spellman, Chris, Robinson, Poole coming off a big game. I'm trying to figure out where I would put Draymond in there. I would probably put Draymond after the top two. So I would probably say my order of trying to get them into a GPP would be Burks, Bowman, Draymond. And then the rest sort of where they would fit in. Next after that is kind of tough for me. It depends a lot, Slate, what else you're doing on your team. But that would be the top three for me pretty clearly.
Okay.
What do we have? Where do we have Jake Puddle ownership at now on our updated? We have Jake Puddle 18. All right. 18. Did I do that? I did like 1%, but that's. I think we moved it a point or so. That's still too little for me. What do we have Okafor at? Being the follow-up question.
Tad under at 16.6.
Really? I do not think that holds. But what do we have for like the chalky value? Rudy Gay. Okay, that's fine. He projects very well. 30% is 30% is fine. There's we'll talk about this in 10 minutes. We'll get into the nuances of ownership and stuff. So let's move on. Let's clean up.
Let's move on to the next game between the Raptors and the Utah Jazz, where we got news Serge Ibaka will play today.
Yes.
And Kyle Lowry, who was doubtful, has been ruled out. So so he must be kind of inching closer to returning. So with that being said, Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet have really been
Yeah.
impressive in Lowry's absence, especially Van Vliet has been so consistent. And with that being said, I'm sure EMAC is running an Fred Van Vliet contest. So if
One
you
would
guys want
hope.
to
It's
look
a
on
Sunday.
Twitter,
It's a Sunday. People
yeah.
are touching the skin of a dead pig a lot today.
So with that being said, let's start on the Toronto side of things, who are obviously someone who I've been very interested in rostering each time he's been on the slate is a Van Vliet, just because his price is just not adjusted to the potential he has. He's priced at 7.4 today. You got an AA in your rankings.
Yep. It helps to think of him as Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, for sure. And
like
that's
they
one
play
way.
very similarly. The year started and Kyle Lowry was 60. There were just a number. I felt very good that at the first week this year, there were a number of guys I looked at and went, that is too cheap for their role right now. There was Andre Drummond, Kyrie Irving, Kyle Lowry, and just a number of guys who was like, yeah, that guy projects to 7x that score every night. That's going to have to come up. And one of them was Kyle Lowry. Now, I figured he'd play 35 minutes, not 40 damn minutes every night. I'm not sure what that was about, but he just consistently demolished that number. And there are certainly for actual basketball, defensively, they're kind of different players. Both Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry are excellent defenders in limited circumstances. It's sort of like, I was going to make an analogy to writers or musicians, but we're running out of time, so I'll just let that one go. But they project, fantasy basketball-wise, pretty damn similar. And without Kawhi Leonard, $7,400 Kyle Lowry was still going to be a little too cheap. The matchup is obviously not an ideal one, put mildly. But 7,400, very, very good cash game play. Absolutely fine in tournaments. Puts up good scores in difficult matchups frequently. Just played Orlando, again, in a game where the team scored, I think it was 173 points. Had a perfectly good fantasy line. Had about 50, if I recall correctly. So, yes, for me, the very clear priorities on Toronto are VanVleet, then a pretty decent step for me. Because I have Siakam only projected for a few more fantasy points, and he's $1,300 more, so pretty big step, Siakam. And then you get into an interesting conversation where it probably ends up being in tournaments Anunoby, then Powell, then I guess Marc Gasol and Rondae.
Yeah. On top of VanVleet and Siakam, I'm definitely leaning towards, like you said, VanVleet. Other than that, I'm not really interested. There was a time where Chris Boucher was obviously garnered my interest. Obviously, he's like a G League and Summer League legend of ours, and we've enjoyed to roster him.
He's fine in the NBA when he gets time. He's just gotta figure out some of the nuances of the game. But he's a better Marquise Chris.
Mm-hmm. And I think we should move on with 5 minutes left to the Utah side of things.
Very quickly, yes.
Where Donovan Mitchell and Joe Ingles, Mike Conley. Joe Ingles is just it's just playing a different role this year. He's coming off the bench and just has been, I feel like, had a tough time adjusting to the new role. Yeah. Mike Conley just has taken a step back and let Donovan Mitchell do his thing.
Yep.
And that's one way to look at it. It's obviously there's getting chemistry build up there, but Donovan Mitchell priced at A2. Obviously this matchup I would say is a tougher matchup for Mitchell. What's your interest on the Utah Jazz side of things?
Light, but not dreadful. They are priced extremely well. In tournaments, I ranked 7 members of the Jazz, and they got AA and 5 Bs for GPP rankings. So I kind of like getting a member of the Jazz in your lineup just because they're priced pretty well. Donovan Mitchell gets an A in GPPs, even though his price for the matchup is pretty not ideal. I have him projected very similarly to Fred VanVleet, for example, who costs $800 less. So it's difficult to get there. That being said, 4-game slate, Donovan Mitchell can do just fine for you, but isn't going to make it into my first lineup. Rudy Gobert is going to go very, very low owned. His minutes will start to decrease a little bit more now that Ed Davis is back in the fold. There's a real relevant thing with when Ed Davis is out, Rudy Gobert plays 3-4 extra minutes. Because they're very comfortable playing Ed Davis at backup. They are not super comfortable playing Tony Bradley at backup, which is why you get lots of, Green playing center and things like that. But the prices on these guys are somewhat interesting. Joe Ingles, 4,100. Look, guy's only getting, mid-20s in time. His point guard usage has largely disappeared with the advent of Mike Conley, but I'm absolutely fine with a smattering of that. Mike Conley, $5,800 is too cheap for what you can get out of Mike Conley. Cash doesn't make a ton of sense. But again, that's really cheap, and he's going to give you some sort of number. And GPPs, I certainly don't mind it. So again, not a team I'm super over the hill targeting, but I have some affection with getting some of the, especially the cheaper members of the Jazz. I ranked Ed Davis, who's 3K flat and is going to play 12 to 14 minutes and score that many, if not a couple more fantasy points. Might get run to blowout. It's not the craziest.
Yeah, I completely agree with your take there. We're checking in at ownership right now. Another update just came in. Siakam is coming in at the second highest owned player, at priced at 8.7 at 37%.
Yeah, people want to, and he's basically in a dead tie with Rudy Gay. They're both at 37 in percentages. I think both ownerships are perfectly reasonable. You are looking for spend up options. Pascal Siakam is in a poor spot, but still, given his minutes and his usage, is going to give you 40 to 45 a lot of the time. I suspect I'd come in a little under that. Like, I generally want to hunt upside a little more. I'd rather get my exposure to the team playing Fred VanVleet at 27%. I do suspect maybe that ownership is slightly inverted. Tell you in a couple minutes. But there is possibility of an error there. Yeah, we have Gay on top. I'm fine with it. All Gay on top jokes, please wait 2 minutes. But 38%, that's roughly appropriate. Again, I'm a much bigger fan of playing Jakob, but you could certainly play both of them. I'm largely ambivalent on that take. Pascal Siakam at a similar percentage. I'd probably want a little less. DeRozan, probably want a little more. We have him at 33%. That price is just really good, and I do think, even though it hasn't been borne out in the past, that a greater upside should be tolerable. In this position, Drummond, just fine at 28%. I'd probably actually want a little more. VanVleet, I'd want more. Terrence Ross, again, we have at 25%. He's 4,300. I would rather have Jake Puddle there, but $4,300 Terrence Ross against Golden State is just great. No complaints. Aaron Gordon's 24. I'd want more of that. Nothing else stands out here. Alec Burks at 22. I still want more of that. Last game he went back and you had a game where, their top 6 shot guys took 9, 10, 10, 10, 10, and I think it was 13 shots for Alec Burks. Game before that he had 19 against the Bulls, I think it was. He's really the guy carrying the largest dumb old upside there, and I do think the guards have the best chance of penetrating to the inner sanctum there and bringing home some gold. So pretty big fan of Burke still at that price. He should be owned a little bit more than that on a team where he gets to do his mini D'Angelo Russell impression on a nightly basis.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
And with that said, we're pretty much at lock. People said there might be some overlay on DraftKings, so I think maybe contests might not rake, but I didn't see anything that's really stood out. I will take a look.
29 seconds. I'm going to the lobby and we're no, there is no overlay, but it won't fill is a correct appraisal of the situation there. Yeah, they're going to take in 165K and pay out 150 in their main $150,000 excellent eights, which means they will rank 9% instead of 15 or 16%, which is very, very good. That's outstanding. And we're locked.
And we're at lock.
So we'll do some ownership first. Let's do a little DraftKings ownership.
Let's do some ownership before we hop over to. We have had some FanDuel specific questions. Maybe for the FanDuel slate, we can knock out probably that last game and then take some questions for everyone.
Yeah, and I wanted to. I imagine you saw my tweet. I wanted to discuss some of the happenings of last night. Where live on air, I screwed a pooch, and want to talk about it for a little bit because I think it's important for everyone to understand the limitations of things and how everyone can do better, because it's whatever I might like to say about it, costs some people some significant money, and anytime that can be avoided, we have to look at it. So I want to talk about just the limits of reason, if you will. So okay, let's I'm getting the ownership. I'm tired of waiting for you.
You got the ownership? Okay, I was trying to pull it up.
I'm getting it. You do your thing. I imagine there's some interesting late slips too. Number 1, and this will feed well into our next conversation. Number 1, Rudy Gay, 54%. I would have less than 54% Rudy Gay, shockingly. He's fine. I Don't immediately look at any number between 0 and 100%.
Where would you have liked him to come in at if you were to, let's say, build 100 lineups?
I think. Well, I don't know what would like him to have come in at means. I do think, given position, circumstances, opportunity, and price, there is an appropriate ownership for each person, and they will come in over or under it. 54% is too high for Rudy Gay. This will get into, and it's amusing for this analogy, is that is almost exactly the ownership of Ben Mclemore last night. He was 53% and change. Rudy Gay is 53% and change. It was more appropriate for Ben Mclemore, basically on virtue of price. But when we were talking about him and I was ascribing a full fade at 70%, I said 45, 50, or 55 is appropriate, were my exact words. That's a little high for Rudy Gay based on his price, the slate, the other players. So I think he should be somewhere around where we had him projected, 38 to 40. That's probably about the right number based on odds of success, odds of failing. Obviously, this is just intuition. I haven't written a matrix of 16 algorithms to determine the exact ownership Rudy Gay should be. But I do think on a slate with this many options, 54% for someone who, just in the last game showed that even given significant minutes, can fail. 54% is a little high, but it's not a crazy play. And again, this is a far better matchup. In that last game, he played 32 minutes and saw copious amounts of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George guarding him on the other side of the ball. That's, far better than Langston Galloway and Blake Griffin. And so it's not a crazy number, but that's a little high. DeMar DeRozan, 51%. Again, a little high. That should probably be 40, 42, 43. There's nothing wrong with that. Drew Holiday, 35.5. That's, again, probably just a touch high. Having Lonzo back is a relevant distinction. This is a team that has failed in this matchup a couple times this year, including the day before yesterday. Jakob, all right, so here's where it got really interesting. Jakob Poeltl, 31%. Jalil Okafor, 29%. So virtual tie between those two guys. And that feels about right. I think both numbers are a little bit low. But them being roughly even is probably about right for tournaments. Okafor is, Poeltl I think is a better catch can play. He's cheaper, and the minutes are, in my opinion, much more solid. Okafor, there's a number of ways they can get away. They have two other guys they don't mind playing at center. They can run Melly out there, who basically in the last game just played 11 minutes and functioned purely as a backup for the four. He didn't touch the floor at center, which was split entirely between Hayes and Okafor. But they have other guys they can play there, and, foul trouble's a reasonable possibility there. So in cash, I would prefer Poeltl at his price, but in tournaments, them being about even is right. Schroeder, 27%, feels good. Ingram, 20. Yeah, maybe want a little more. I mean, he's expensive. He's definitely expensive, but that role is incredibly secure. I do think he should be less than Drew, which he is. That makes sense. Again, none of this is that crazy. Lonzo, 13. Chris Paul, 13. Gallinari, 12. Redick, 10. Lyles, 10. Blake Griffin, 9. Probably want more than 9% Blake Griffin in what's a pretty good matchup on a 4-game slate. But Derek White, 7. Josh Hart, 5.75. That's rough with Lonzo back. DeJounte Murray, 4. Abdul Nader got up 3.4. Nerlens Noel, 3.3. I'd want a little more. But yeah, this is, looking at this ownership, there is nothing grotesquely out of bounds that I'm like, oh, people screwed that up. So, sadly, no free cookies.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, obviously, once Orlando Golden State starts. That ownership might be something where things do stand out and whatnot. So let's quickly tackle some FanDuel specific plays and whatnot before we talk about last night's Mclemore. Or do you want to talk about the last night's stuff before we move on?
I will defer to you, sir. Whichever order you'd like to do.
Yeah, let's take care of our FanDuel players. Okay. There's some things that have changed on FanDuel. Fred VanVleet is now a point guard. He used to be a shooting guard. That's one thing that does stand out. And there is the last game on the slate between the Clippers and the Wizards. And where we got news that no Mo Wagner will be playing. And how do you expect Scott Brooks to handle the front court rotation with no Bryant and obviously no Wagner, who's playing behind him? Who's going to play the backup big minutes? How are they going to handle that?
You just said no Bryant. Did I misunderstand that?
Sorry, I said no Wagner. Sorry.
Right, I think you said no Bryant for a second before that, and then threw me for a curveball. If Thomas Bryant is out, then that's a massive situation that I somehow missed. But yeah, Wagner turned his ankle on Friday, and I thought there was some reasonable chance he wasn't going to suit up tonight. So that's not the most shocking news, and I believe I did not rank him for exactly that reason. Let me look at some of my sit depth charts there. But those guys.
Jan Mahimi's hurt too.
Yeah, so. He's not there. He would be third man up. I think, center is already on Fanduel pretty dicey on that 3-man slate, if I recall. Let me go look again. You have basically as centers that don't feel kind of stinky playing on that slate. You have Harrell, Gobert, Bryant. Marc Gasol. I'm talking about guys you can play. Marc Gasol, Willie Cauley-Stein. That's actually 5 that are reasonable. Mo Bamba at 4,700 is in play. That's 6. Zubac is in play. That's 7. So there's actually 7 centers for 3 games. So I stand corrected. That's not incredibly deep. But Bryant is pretty clearly going to project as the best for me at this point. We have seen that prior to the evolution of Mo Wagner and sort of the minute split between those two guys, there were large chunks of the season where you got up to 34, 35 minutes out of Thomas Bryant, and barring any sort of foul trouble, it's my impression that he should get back to somewhere around that level tonight. I don't think they want to be playing Davis Bertans at center for extensive periods of this game, or some of the other guys that they could roll out there. I don't think they want to play Rui Hachimura at center for any extended period of time. I am not that differently to the Jakob Poeltl situation. Pretty decent fan of Thomas Bryant this evening. I'm curious if you have a take on this.
Yeah, no, I do like Thomas Bryant. I feel like he's going to play well into the 30 minutes in this matchup, barring any foul trouble.
He's going to try.
Yeah, so, and obviously no Wagner there. At 6'3" price tag, I feel like he's probably my favorite center option. I'm less inclined to pay up for Gobert at 8'4", Harrell at 7'6". Obviously he can get there. He's shown there, and this is a good matchup. But I do like those $1,300 in savings and going down to Bryant, so I can possibly pay up for a Kawhi or a Paul George or a Bradley Beal, who are the studs in this matchup.
Yep.
But in terms of other options on FanDuel,
it's also a wicked fast game. Sorry, we should mention that talking about the earlier games. There was a nice variety of games, with my favorite game actually being what the heck was Orlando Golden State at, like 208 or something like that. Like it was the slowest game of the 5 we're discussing all evening by a significant number. This game only available on FanDuel, this late night hammer, is by far the fastest one, but they are in Los Angeles, and I'm pretty sure the Clippers are healthy 13-point favorites or something.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. And then Thomas Bryant is already checking in as the chalkiest player on FanDuel at 63%. So I'm rightfully so.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a number.
So that's definitely up there. One guy, Bradley Beal is checking the second highest owned. How do you think this matchup will go for Bradley Beal? And also, Washington is in LA, and they've been in LA for some time, so that LA hangover is fully in play.
Yeah. I mean, there's no CJ Miles as well, which matters just for bench depth a little bit. It does have something to do with exactly your chances of pulling Bradley Beal monster games. But if you're gonna play this, slate, certainly this is the game your eyes are going to get immediately drawn to, and you're going to take Thomas Bryant. You're going to take one of the stud forwards on the Clippers, and then it's not so hard because there's a lot of pretty decent value to grab Bradley Beal. So that's just This is sort of going to happen a lot. There's a lot of really good... Aaron Gordon, who I mentioned being a big fan of on DraftKings at 6K, is only 61 on Fanduel. That's even better with 3 per steal and block. Everyone on is even better priced. 5-6 for Fultz is better on Fanduel than 5-3 on DK. 7-4 for Isaac is better than 7K on DK. Gordon at 6-1 is better than 6 flat. Kem Birch at 4.5 as opposed to 4.7. I think it's dollar per dollar cheaper, if I'm remembering both those numbers correct. But yeah, I would end up with a ton of Orlando, and then these guys we are here talking about. So, yeah, I'm trying to let me go through my notes and see if I have any other particular cookies about matchups. I have some Bryant Harrell stuff which isn't really relevant. They didn't play versus each other
we
a lot.
can just take some questions.
Sure.
Yeah, so Slack chat, tag me if you guys have some FanDuel specific questions, and we can tackle them throughout the next time. And let's see if YouTube chat, if you guys have any questions, feel free to. I'm taking a peek there as well. So I will obviously give preference to the Slack. So tag us with that, and yeah, I guess like the Leonard at 10-2 at power forward. It is right price. I would rather try to spend up my salary, possibly for Paul George at 9-1, and try to allocate those $1,100 elsewhere. That's probably what my first indication is looking at FanDuel.
Yeah, I have them projected where I very slightly prefer Paul George for $1,100 cheaper, but I also prefer the position to be open in that at power forward you can play. Just on the Magic, I really like $4,500 Kem Birch and $6,100 Aaron Gordon. I have no problem playing both of them since they're actually not both playing the same position. So I'm a little more excited to use a small forward spot on that spend up than a power forward spot on that spend up, because I really like, again, as I mentioned, Gordon and Birch. But if you're getting away from one of those, there's at power forward other options. Somebody asked Ed Davis is minimum price. That's in play for me on a 3-game slate. Amari Spellman at 4,400 has shown a couple times. Again, taking power forwards and small forwards against Orlando is something I've tried to avoid a lot this year, and it's accepting particularly talented individuals. It's been a pretty good rule of thumb, so don't really want to do that. I'd much rather even take a shot at Hachimura for a few $100s more. Pascal, if you can get up to 58. But yeah, the 2 Magic guys are too cheap for me. Sorry.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We got a question over the favorite studs on FanDuel. Probably near the studs tier with Paul George, Beal, and Kawhi. In terms of a raw points, I would. Let's see. In terms of a raw points, I'd probably go Beal, George, and Kawhi. But in terms of a roster,
you don't mean
build,
raw. I don't think you mean raw points when you say that. You have Beal projected for more raw points than George. So you have projected for more raw points than Kawhi. Sorry, I just want.
I have Kawhi and Paul George projected identically within like a few
interesting
decimal points.
Okay.
Yeah. And I do have Beal just a tad bit, but I'm more inclined to pay up for George at that small forward position in terms of just the roster build, what I'm looking at. So don't Embiid my size. In preference of getting like a stud who I'd like the most, for me, it's personally Paul George. Eddie, how about you?
Give me a minute. I need to rotate through and because there's a lot of tacit implications to who you pick here. It's going to be either Paul George or Bradley Beal. I need to take a second, but those are going to be those would be the 2 players I would be.
Any thoughts on Draymond tonight? I'm very excited to play Aaron Gordon at that power forward position, and with Draymond's price and he's only capped it around that 27, 28 minute mark. Price at 7K. I'm not that interested. I'm willing to look elsewhere.
I'm fairly interested on DK. On FanDuel, he'd be, I have a feeling, my 5th or 6th favorite guy. And I'm fine if you get there. The FanDuel scoring does, if you get, he was kind of crap last game, but I think 2 games ago was Golden State, and he had, 8 and 6 and 4 and 3 and 2 in a very Draymond game where he, got out there and did a little bit of everything. I have him for 23 minutes. This is a road back-to-back for them. They're in Orlando tonight. Tomorrow they're in Hotlanta. So they're going to run the same 9 guys. They have been playing forever. But again, Draymond saw 24 minutes 2 games ago and 19 minutes last game. And they're not pushing anyone too hard. I think Burks and Bowman were the only ones to get 30. So we look at this team as, super light roster, super undermanned for the situation. Draymond got 19 minutes. Everyone else saw, I think it was 23 to 32 minutes in that last game, with only 2 of them getting over 30. So, it isn't a situation where, they're not that cheap anymore, and everyone sort of has it in their head like, oh, they're so shorthanded, everyone's going to have to play monster minutes. No, not really. They play everyone 29. Yeah, they run 9 guys out there. They need to get 240 minutes, so if you play 9 dudes, that averages out to 26 minutes a guy. You don't need to, go crazy with any one person. And they have a very even minutes distribution. I will look at that last game to make sure that I'm not completely talking out of my ass here, but that is my recollection.
We got another interesting question between Terrence Ross or Jordan Mccray. Both are priced similarly on Fanduel. Ross at 4.4. And McCray's at 4.2.
Yeah, I would play Terrence Ross there. And again, y'all know how much I like Jordan Mcray. Man can get a bucket. Sure. But I would play Terrence Ross pretty comfortably tonight. Part of the thing with part of the thing with Mcray has also been that the ownership just wasn't where it should be, and it's been creeping and will continue to creep. Golden State, I think.
Which Magic players would you avoid putting together? Would it probably be Bamba and Birch?
Bamba and Birch is the first most immediate one. I'm not sure I care otherwise.
How about Fultz and Augustine, maybe?
They've been playing next to each other. Last game, I think Fultz and Augustine played
shared, yeah, they
30 and 26. I don't really want to play Fultz and Augustine anyway, because one of them is probably picking up the dimes, and so that would probably be the second one. Would be those 2 guys. They're pretty cheap. I don't have a giant issue should I end up with them both. Let me find it. Somewhere I was looking at no, that's the Pistons. No, that's the Lakers. That's where I was helping that guy on the early slate. I know it's here somewhere. That's my wife's shopping list. That's definitely not it. Alright, I guess I'll just have to type in those 3 words again. No problem. Magic. Download. Box. Last game was the Raptor game, right? Okay, there it is. Yeah, 90 to 83. Alright, I remembered all that right. You got 30 for Fultz, 26 for DJ Augustine. Right on the nose. So they played minimum, and it was exactly 8 minutes next to each other, so they could both certainly get there. But I mean, Augustine is a bit of a reach anyway, and if you're playing Augustine, you kind of want to not play Fultz, because your chance of doing something really great is Fultz getting 3 fouls in 5 minutes. That's kind of what you're hoping for. So could you play them next to each other? Sure. 3 game slate, really, we're talking about at this point. But ideally that they would be negatively correlated, and I'd rather not if I could avoid doing so.
Yeah, so someone's asked me a pretty interesting question. Someone is like, any players you're looking to fade because of over ownership? And Jakob Green is so.
We're talking about Fanduel. Okay, I'll go look.
Yeah, and Jakob Green is priced at 4K. I know it's a short slate if you were to maybe foresee a blowout, he might get there at 4K. But he's coming in at 22% right now. And we have Kevin Birch, who's $500 more at 20%. I do think Jakob Green at 22% is a bit too high, just because.
Yeah, I'm going. That is wrong. I am. One of the other things we got to talk about is once in a while the ownership is going to be incorrect. I occasionally have a politics discussion, and one thing I find myself saying to people frequently is, I believe that policemen are important civil servants who form a necessary function in our society, and that given specific reason should be treated with respect and deference at all times. And I also believe that there is clinical, obvious academic interest that there have been police officers, especially in certain areas of this country, that have singled people out because of the color of their skin and treated them inappropriately, and that is a heinous thing that needs to be uprooted, and anyone doing that needs to be fired and prosecuted. And I can believe both those things at the same time. And this was a very heavy-handed way to get around to, I can say that I still think our ownership projections are brilliant. I will say with no hesitation that I have looked at 5 or 6 sets of ownership projections since coming into doing this job over the last 5 years, and the Awesemo ownership projections are still the best I've ever seen by a tier. It is not a close designation for me. And they're still going to be wrong, sometimes significantly. And that needs to be something that is taken into account. So I'm sort of pivoting this into the Ben Mclemore conversation. Because I think it's important. It's important to look forward, and what do we got? 5:22. We'll go back to this game in 10 minutes or something.
Okay.
But allow me to take full responsibility. I completely, nobody's fault but my own, screwed the pooch last night on Ben Mclemore call. Number of people came into the chat and said, I came into this playing 100% Ben Mclemore, and because of Eddie, I ended up playing 20%, and instead of making my mortgage payment, I lost my college fund. And that's my fault, and I apologize. Obviously, I can't be right about everything all the time. I'm sure if this is anything other than your first show, you know that. But I have been known to crow when correct. And that is a truly heinous call that truly cost people significant amounts of money. So let it be entirely clear that I take full responsibility and want to make that clear for the purpose of saying DFS is naturally a forward-facing enterprise. There's a lot of work to be done. 4, 5, 11, 14 games on a slate. You're always looking forward to the next day. But much like you, I always want to look back at what I'm doing and how I'm doing it to see what I'm doing well and what I could do better. So when I look back at that situation, well, first of all, I want to say it is worth pointing out real quick. We'll take 30 seconds on how much of a ridiculous Ben Mclemore performance that was. Rimpec, I got some trivia for you here. How many years has Ben Mclemore been in the NBA?
Ben Mclemore was drafted in 2013 by the Kings, I think 9th or 10th overall after KCP.
Really nice job. That is correct. This is his, I believe, 7th year in the NBA. Did you know that in his 2nd year in the league, he played every single game and averaged 33 minutes a game? This by way of getting around to our trivia question. Prior to last night's performance, how many times in his 6+ year NBA career, including years playing more than 30 minutes a game and years playing every game of the season, has Ben Mclemore recorded double-digit rebounds?
I'm going to say one fluky game got in there once.
That's exactly correct. One time he got exactly 10. Last night, Ben Mclemore got 13 rebounds. Now, it's not to say that it wasn't a good rebounding spot and there wasn't infinite pace, and Westbrook came out early because of the blowout. And again, Westbrook and Harden being out obviously leads to infinitely more upside, and there's no Capella. So rebounds were around. Still, a reasonable rebound projection for him would have been 5 and change. 13 was a little bit fluky. Additionally, I could go into this for a while, but making 75% of your shots from the field, not something he's frequently going to do. So it is worth pointing out that, yes, this was a top 1% performance from Ben Mclemore. So my mistakes were amplified by an extremely unlikely outcome. But they are still my mistakes. So the things, and I'd be interested in anyone's feedback, yours, people watching the show, because I want to do this as well as possible, is I try to, one of the things I try to do is, as a host, is throw as much information as I can and not just say, like this guy, don't like this guy. Sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I'm not. But I try to hedge a lot or give a method for my madness. Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 4. Is it Scene 4? Nah, see, I did that and I don't even know. Anyway, there is... So, like, I remember saying 70% is preposterous. And 70% is preposterous. I will accept any amount of mathematical scrutiny from anyone. If you play that slate out 1,000,000 times and Ben Mclemore is 70% owned, the correct number you would want to own would be 0. I'm certain. Now, I don't know where that number is. Maybe it gets there at 68 or 66 or 62. But when it came out at 53, or before it came out at 53, I said 40, 50, 55. I think was exactly what I said on the show. Or 45, 50, I think I said the other time. 2 times I said it because I was trying to hedge by saying that number is egregiously too high. There are lots of good value options. Again, we got 30-something out of Robin Lopez. And we got a little bit over 30 out of Austin Rivers, and there was one other one as well. So on games where Ben Mclemore puts up, let's say, 29 or less, which is probably almost exactly half games, a little less than half games, you wouldn't want him. And again, if he's 70% owned, if you play the slate out a billion times, you would want 0 Ben Mclemore if the ownership was going to be 70%. You would certainly want less than 70%, I guess is the point. But I think once I said, if our ownership is correct, or if that number holds, I think I need to do a better job of making it clear that may not happen and being less. I try not to be hot takey, but I was very emphatic with my take. And I apologize for not having a scripted or pre-organized thoughts here. I was doing the show by myself, but I really want to do a better job at this, because when I look back at it, I think somebody watching that show gets the impression Eddie hates Ben Mclemore, and that isn't at all the case. I said I had him as the highest projected piece of value, and I did. I had him a couple points higher than Robin Lopez, a couple points higher than, I think I specifically differentiated this, that I said I have him, then Lopez, then Rivers, then Clark, I think was the way I had those value guys. And I think they came in exactly that order, by the way, but I think I specifically gave that out there. So I said that, and I said he should be 45 or 50% owned, which I hopefully makes it clear that I don't completely hate him. But no matter how much I might hope that, I think somebody watching that show comes away with the impression Eddie hates Ben Mclemore. And he compared him to Corey Joseph, who he absolutely hated, and that was a great day, and we made all the money, so I should play no Ben Mclemore. So I feel like I screwed it, and I'm just sort of talking it through out loud because I don't want to do that. It's going to work out fine some days, but I think, I don't know, I came through maybe more strongly negative than I should have, and I'm just trying to do my job a little bit better. So anyone in the chat or hosting the show with me, or via Twitter or private message or something, like I always really, I take it as a massive responsibility telling other people, or suggesting to other people, telling is the wrong verb there, suggesting to other people how they invest their money. And if there's ways I can do that better, I would like you to let me know, because I did not make clear enough how I would react differently to 50-55% ownership as opposed to the 70% we had projected, and that's a pretty key piece of information. So there's a lot of things I have to do better there when we talk about the most important plays of the evening. And so anyone who can help me do that a little better, I'd appreciate it.
No, I that's something that's become such a hard thing to, if Ben Mclemore doesn't get 13 rebounds, I mean, he'll probably end up with 27 fantasy points or 28 fantasy points. He ended up with 44 last night, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets 6 rebounds, he loses 7 rebounds, which is 8.75, and the double-double bonus, which is 1.5, so that'd be 10 off, which would put him very close to Robin Lopez and a little over Austin Rivers. I mean, he had a very good game across the board, and that's why I'm less worried about I'm more worried about the process than the individual result.
True.
Like I'm going to do this 250 nights tonight, and I'm going to completely screw up 50 of them, and that was one of them.
I think you made it really clear that at that ownership, Mclemore, and maybe the process maybe was different because it was a smaller slate in terms of maybe Mclemore being that highly owned. The process maybe adapting to say, in the sense we had to have to mention, maybe I don't know what we had projected Mclemore going into it, but
we had him projected at 68 and change. He came out at 53 and change.
53 change.
Now 53. In all honesty, if we hadn't projected at 53, I would have said I would have a little less. That would have been my response. I would never have said have at 70%. It's the correct play to have 0. It just is. It maths out clearly, because it's just the percentage of time that he fails is greater than the percentage of people who don't have it. It's pretty obvious. 54, that's a much more complicated thing. And now that's still, I imagine, him versus Robin Lopez versus Austin Rivers versus Gary Clark. I would have had a little bit more of all those guys and a little bit less. But personally, if I was playing 150 lineups, I would have had somewhere around 60 Ben Mclemore at that point. I don't think I'd have gotten to 53%. But if I expected him to be 53%, I would be at a little less or even. But
yeah,
no way I would personally, I wouldn't even have entertained a full fade because he was the best value on that play, and it was a shorter slate.
I think one thing that we do have to always like consider is like a lot of the times like the people watching the show usually build one lineup, many or 2 to 3, many, and like that's the majority of our audience. And where when we were giving out plays or picks and whatnot, in terms of like talking about best ways to take down a GPP using one lineup, yes, I think it is the correct play when Ben Mclemore at 70%. If you want to win all the money with one lineup, the right play is to fade him. In terms of if you're trying to take down a GPP in that one lineup, because of how the player Ben Mclemore is. So for me personally, I built one lineup on Fanduel. My decision factor was I was playing around the four-person limit per team was what I had to make sure of what I had to deal with. So personally, I liked Westbrook and Harden for those prices. Mm-hmm. And I liked Austin Rivers, who I had those three. And my decision factor for my fourth rocket was either Mclemore or Clark. And I chose going with Clark. Obviously, that didn't work out as like nowhere as well as Mclemore. But that's for me, the decision factor was, okay, if I do fade Mclemore, I had money for Bembry, who I played Bembry, and obviously with the news that Reddish came out that Reddish wasn't going to play, that was my pivot. These decision factors are always really tough.
I didn't get. I mean, it was obviously not nearly as high profile. I was pretty low on Bembry. He got one mention on the show. I said he was fine. I had him as a B in cash. People were like, Bembry is my favorite play of the day. He had played 41 minutes the night before, and it's not like Trey is out, so you're getting all sorts of point guard usage, and so. I thought that was a little over. I mean, he was obviously priced very well. I was fine with anyone having any amount of Bembry, but frustrating for me. I got a number of things right, and that was one of them. I would definitely have been well under on Bembry, but yeah, I don't know. No one seems to be saying much. I'm not getting any tweets on topic. No one in the Slack is really adding anything. So I guess we could just move on. But I try to talk about the internal process as much as I can, because if you're listening to me and it has any weight with you whatsoever, I doubt you're just here for my smiling face. I want you to understand how I get to conclusions and what the words I say mean and what I try to include, so you can more accurately parse a lot of information in a very limited time. And I'll continue to try to hone it down to a more distilled message, which means talking about crap like this less. So I guess I'm done.
No, I mean, the days that, like, for example, the days that it works out, it's great. And there's obviously going to be days where it doesn't work out. So
yes,
it's just the process of the nature of DFS. It's just you never lose in DFS. You either win or learn, right, Eddie?
That is. I think you can do both. And I think there are times you can, I worry about result bias a lot. Like, I really worry about result bias a lot. Like, they're not talking about like the Mclemore thing, because that's a process question, and I think that should be analyzed and reviewed, and I haven't had time yet, but I'm going to go back and watch yesterday's show and see, how reasonable I was on the topic, because it's such a critically important point. Again, most of the time you're dealing with a range of outcomes of, 23 to 35. It's unlikely he completely destroys the slate like he does last night. So I don't want to be overly, results oriented there. But yeah, I guess we got through it. It's just it bugged me at the end of the day. Like, there were a couple of people who like, I had the 100K, I swapped Mclemore to this guy, otherwise it was perfect, and it's like, yeah, okay, that bothers me. So I'm, I don't know, looking for answers where there may not be any. But rest assured, I'm doing the very best I can. Pierre tweets me, longtime watcher of the show. How many Magic players is too many on Fanduel?
There's lineups I like with 4.
Probably 5.
Personally, yeah.
I have no problem with both power forwards, one of the point guards, and Isaac. Like, those 4 players make plenty of sense for me. I probably slightly prefer 3. But 3 is probably the number I want. And I suspect, again, I will look at our currently projected FanDuel ownership. I suspect I will be over on a lot of these Magic guys. I mean, we do not have a player from that game. Am I correctly looking? Hold on, I want to make sure I'm looking at, okay, that was DraftKings. Hold up. About to say. Yeah, I mean, we have the top... We don't have anyone from that game projected above 35%. We're sitting on massive Thomas Bryant ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Probably about right. He's the best priced center. The likely outcome is that in a very good matchup for a center, he gets a ton of time. The immediate pivot is Montrezl Harrell. But yeah, they're gonna be running small. You will get bits of Bertans at center, and again, the Clippers are a team that you can run small against. So it is not that they have a propensity to at times run small, and the Clippers are a team that you can survive doing it. They don't have a hulking center out there. They have Montrez, who runs and guns, so you can get away with it a little bit. So if you're putting a gun to my head, I guess I would come in on less than 63% Bryant. But he does price out as the best center pretty clearly. Next, we have Beal at 54%. I think roster construction pulls you there a lot.
Yeah.
But our top price player from the Orlando Golden State game is the 8th most owned player. And then we hit a few in a row where around 33 to 35% we hit Fultz, Gordon, and Fournier all in a hurry. We don't have Khem Birch for quite a while.
Another thing I'd like to talk about on FanDuel, something way you can get really unique is if you're going to have money left over from Beal, one way to just easily get unique is if you're going to think Donovan Mitchell is going to outscore Beal in I don't know how many chances out of 10 that happens.
Probably a little less than 4.
4? Yeah, so you can just make that.
I would think if you put a gun to my head and said, what percentage of the time, if you play this out 1,000,000 times, does Donovan Mitchell outscore Bradley Beal? I'd guess high 30s. I think 38.
And you can just make that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can just pivot down.
That's brilliant advice. If you have enough money for Bradley Beal, build that lineup, put it in a tournament, then build the exact same lineup, take out Beal and put Donovan Mitchell in and put it in a lineup. And leave at least $1,000 on the table. And
like you've mentioned this many times before in FanDuel, it's just building these micro rosters of the positions, and over and over again. That's how you really do get unique, especially on the shorter slates. It's something that's very something that I like doing, and it does pay off at times. So
yeah, someone has asked what my core is on FanDuel for GPPs. Actually, 2 different people asked the same question there.
Mm-hmm.
It's really weird coming up with a core distinction because I mentioned guys I would be over on. I suspect I would be well over on Aaron Gordon at $6,100. 32 minutes of Aaron Gordon against Golden State at $6,100 feels just way too good for me to be, what is he, 20% owned? Somewhere around there? 20, 35? Oh, never mind. He is in that 35 block. Okay. That's fine. So I suspect I would be a little over that, but that's about the right number there. But the core guys who I'm trying to get in lineups are, Bryant prices out as one of the best plays on the slate. John Isaac, I'm still a big believer of at 7,400. Both ends of the court, his game has stepped up to another level. I think that's very relevant. But yeah, everyone seems owned fairly appropriately, and I don't have a great take to get away other than Khem Birch, who we have listed at 20%. And I will say that's looking at the top 20 guys in ownership on FanDuel we have listed. I agree with about 19 of them. That one I disagree with. We have him at 20%. I think that number comes in closer to 30. And we'll see. We'll check that game does start itself in 20 minutes. So we will see specifically, because it's a tough spot for me because I work here. I'm consistently impressed with the team at Osmo. The tools, the marketing they've done, the behind the scenes work, the constant SEO optimization, the people they bring on to staff, the graphical work, the video work, the stuff they've done on YouTube, the guides, everything. I'm really impressed with the people we work with. No blowing any air up anyone's skirt there. It's legitimate admiration. but occasionally something is going to be wrong. So it puts me in this weird position where I feel like my first responsibility is to convey the best information possible. So I have to occasionally say, yes, I think that one ownership call that we have is wrong, which feels awkward. I don't like criticizing the product, but I don't know how to do it any other way. So I'll ask my bettors and say, like, hey, is it okay if I say I think we have this ownership wrong? Because I think we have that ownership wrong. I think Khem Birch will be 29% and not 20%, and we will check that in 18 minutes.
Yeah, it's obviously there's so many different aspects. I think the behind the scenes team pulls from the ownership. It's really remarkable. I mean, our ownership projections are amazing. They've been instrumental.
Really, really are. I love it. Like, and we're talking about a massive mistake here where it was with less than 20% of the ownership off. It was 15% to go from 68 to 54 on a, like, I'm just saying it's not like we had 73 and it came in at 9. Like so a huge error was 68 to 53, which again is very consequential, but is not mathematically a gigantic differential between prediction and result. I have said many times I am amazed by them because there's so much to take into account. I can't even imagine how it's constructed. Like if I look at Josh's projections or your projections or Adam's projections or I generally can even look at them and sort of reverse engineer in my head how they're done. And this person weights this a little more. I have no idea how we come up with accurate ownership projections. Obviously, you're looking somewhat at the past and ownership and exactly roster construction and how many flex spots there are. It's I could build all the other ones easily. I don't even know where I'd start to build ownership projections as good as ours.
No, that's completely true. We get in some more questions coming in on the slate.
Good.
Fanduel. Ish Smith or IT?
That's cute. That's very cute. Let me I see what you're doing there. I'm picking up what you are putting down. It's a very good question. Because, that game not necessarily going to remain close. I think it's sitting around a 12-point line.
Mm-hmm.
Blowout. Ish Smith is going to be less owned than Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas not playing that great. And Isaiah Thomas runs into a much more burly defensive backcourt than his backup will. So that is a cagey question. I am picking up what you are putting down. You, sir, are a wise man. That is really close for me. I'm looking at ownership and thinking if I think those are right, but that's I like that question. I really like that question. That's a great question. So many implicit layers. I would play Ish Smith.
Okay. Another question coming in. Would you feel
obviously I should say that correlates negatively with a number of people, and I'm sure you know this if you are asking that question, or I'm guessing you know this if you're asking that question, but that would advantage you to spending your money slightly less heavily on, for example, Brad Beal, and so I probably don't want to have Ish and Beal and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, for example. You're going to have to be exposed to some of the spend-ups in that game. It's pretty hard to do it otherwise. You can do it. You can be like, all right, I'm getting Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and feel free. That lineup is unique enough that while you fail 95% of the time, because that game it looks like a bit of a boneyard from fantasy circumstances, when you get there, it's going to be exciting. I mean, it is important to specify mathematically how off these other two games are. The over-unders of the three late games are 205, 209, and 239 and change. That last one's going to engender some pretty significant ownership. And again, I've explained my love for the other one. So you're probably going to have to get a spend-up option there. But your Ish Smith lineup / shares would hopefully be less correlated with the really high spend-up guys in that game than your other lineups where if you are playing Paul George and Brad Beal.
Bless you.
Excuse me. I have like my guard and my whole thing going here now. I don't know if I would have not blown someone's head off with that sneeze, but your Ish Smith you would generally want to have with not all of Beal and George and Kawhi, for example. So, okay.
Another question we got is, would you go Conley and Fournier or Isaac and Bowman on DraftKings?
I would play Isaac and Bowman.
Bowman, yeah. Would you run Mitchell, Montrez, or Fournier and George in GPP? And they currently have Lou Williams already in that lineup.
I would play Mitchell and Montrez.
Then, any love for Zubac on Fanduel? Yeah, it's a short slate. You can go there. Personally, I'm finding a hard time getting away from Thomas Bryant.
I think that is the correct take. You can always play Zubac on. He tends to spike his upsides in games. Well, you know what? I'm going to take a minute on this. So actually, I have a theory here. I want to just un momento, senor. So why don't you tell the people real quick while I fiddle with my Zubac notes what exactly
for this
the thing is tomorrow. What's the
So,
Cyber Monday deal?
So tomorrow, for those who are sticking around, I'd love for you guys all to hit the like button. We're going to be launching a phenomenal deal where I think you guys should all take advantage of it if you have never tried out awesemo.com, especially because we will be giving out a Cyber Monday promo code. This will launch at 12:01 Eastern Time AM, and it will be only valid for tomorrow on December 2nd. And you can get Awesemo Plus Platinum Weekly, the pass for $1. This is usually a $30 value, and this will give you access to ownership projections, player projections, rankings, the lineup builder, Alex's game plan stream, which is phenomenal, where you can pretty much ask him questions one-on-one. It's like him playing the role of a professor of the slate, and you can really go into the slate and ask him what his targets are for the slate. It's a phenomenal feature that we have. His boom and bust tool, where people love it. It's just so many different things that you can look to, and you'll have access for all the sports. So this will give you access for next week's NFL as well, and you should definitely take advantage of it. This is only $1, so maybe if you have $1 to spare, use promo code Cyber Monday. You'll see this heavily promoted across your Twitter platform, YouTube tomorrow. We'd love for you guys to be part of the Awesemo Plus family for the week. Something that we're really excited for you guys to try out. So you'll get to definitely try that out. So very excited to have you guys be part of the family coming up. So we hope you guys take advantage of the promo. With that being said, Eddie, do you have any thoughts on what your favorite tools are besides your rankings? What other tools that you love besides ownership projections and yours? Have you gotten to test any of them out?
Not many. I try intentionally to sort of ostracize myself from the rest of the team. Now it's gonna make me really wrong sometimes because there's a lot of smart guys on the team, and if I listen to every word that you say and Adam says and Lofty says, and Josh especially says, those guys really know their shit. So I'd probably be right a little more often, but I intentionally try to avoid groupthink as much as I can. I just think it's best for everyone. So I don't consume a lot of our material outside of the ownership projections, which are obviously certainly most essential there. So I don't have a ton of experience with the boom bust tools and other things. Again, in my unique situation, not something I can super look at. I like Zubac a lot in tournaments. The more I look at him on FanDuel. The leverage it gives you against the field, which is going to be heavily exposed to Bryant and Harrell, feels pretty good. I can't project him up there with Bryant, but he might be my third favorite GPP center. I really think I'd be on Bryant, Harrell. Yeah, I'd be on Bryant, Harrell, Zubac at $3,800. So I'm fine with you getting to a significant amount of Zubac. It is not a tier A matchup for him. Again, Zubac is a very sort of runs what's blocked guy. The bigger the opposing center is, and The more interior he stays, which aren't necessarily the same thing, because, for example, Brook Lopez is a really big guy, but he tends to be away from the basket. So if the opposing center is, the bigger the opposing center is, and the more interior they are, specifically on defense, but also on offense, the better it plays out for Zubac. And that tends to be something that, so we'll game log this bitch and take a minute on it, because obviously the slate's starting and I want to take a look at it. But if you go back to the beginning of this year, you get the Lakers. He barely played and scored less than 10 fantasy points, and most of their, played 9 minutes in that game. But you look at, he had big game against Golden State, which makes sense. Big game against Charlotte, which is Cody Zeller, who's a pretty big guy and stays inside. Very good game against Utah, 24 fantasy points. Big guy, stays inside. Kind of crappy game against San Antonio. About average size center and tends to get outside a lot. That was an Aldridge game. Played Utah again, 28 fantasy points. Big guy, stays inside. Played Milwaukee, bad game, 13 fantasy points. It's not his milieu. Played Portland, really good game, 19 minutes, 41 fantasy points. So you can sort of hang out in the paint. And if you look at it, this gives a big game against Atlanta. Again, Atlanta's a good matchup, but again, they don't have any centers who are particularly fleet of foot. You're dealing with Alex Len and Damian Jones. Those guys are hanging out around the basket most of the time. This tends to be a trend. So this isn't a, Whiteside really suspect outside game / really huge guy. I get to stay around the basket a lot and be super productive matchup for Zubac, but it's more of a tier 2. It's not a tier 3 one. Bryant will get outside and take a shot. He'd classify in the same middle range for him as, say, Capella would be similar. But I'm $3,800 Zoo. I kind of like.
Yeah, those are all valid points. Another question we have is Conley or Bowman? I think I would go with Conley there.
I have Conley projected slightly higher. I like Bowman quite a bit. I think he again gets over 30 minutes. And I imagine I would be overexposed to Orlando based on what I'm seeing in the conversations I'm having. So I'd be wanting to focus that a little more on a short slate. So I suspect I would end up playing Bowman more for that reason. In a vacuum, Conley is probably a slightly better play for me.
Kem Birch or Amari Spellman?
Birch and Cash pretty easily. Although there is a point where if you are playing, Isaac and Gordon and Fultz, that's a conversation. But raw projection, I have Birch higher. So if you're separating it for reasons other than projection.
And looks like there's an Amber Alert for Rudy Gay. So he's been gone missing, as in non-existent.
Well, he was fine. I don't, he's not at that Corey Joseph, Ben McLemore level, but he is a guy who's shown he is not guaranteed points, I guess I'm saying. 50-something% was again objectively too high. And I think most people should have an intuitive sense of this. Like you should if we discuss this with almost anyone, you should say, okay, here you go, 4-game slate. Rudy Gay, no LaMarcus Aldridge, probably gets 30 minutes, bit more defensive side of the court there. Not a bad matchup. Where should it be owned? And if you've been doing this for any period of time, your brain should say back to you, high 30s, low 40s. How about 57? You should be like, yeah, it's a little too high. That's just a little bit much. That matchup with Detroit isn't particularly brilliant. The whole team isn't, is losing by 14 at this point. But it's no particular genius to look at that. Like, just if you've done it for a few years, you have enough box scores and numbers in your head, you'll know that this is who Rudy Gay is, and you're occasionally going to bust out the 40, and you're occasionally get the 20. Plus, it's also Popovich team, and they have other guys they can really put in for him. So you probably get 30 minutes. You might get 24. Like, it's a real possibility with Rudy Gay. Jakob is going to have a hard time not playing 36 minutes. And I see they ran that rotation exactly as I guess. They do have Eubanks in there backing up at center. I had other people talk to me today about any number of guys, and did I think Damari Carroll played? But no, they're running a 10-man rotation, and Eubanks 3-4-1 in 7 minutes. I ranked him. That's the best I could do for him. But Pirtle 4-2-2, and it's going about as projected. But yeah, you would have. I would have suspected Gay to do well better than this. 10 minutes, 1 of 5 from the field, 2 points, 1 block, 1 turnover. That's all, folks.
Beverly or Fultz?
I would play Fultz in cash, and I'm fine with Beverly as a pivot. I imagine we project him to be well lower owned. We have Fultz at somewhere. Make sure that. We have Fultz at 15%. Beverly probably. Do we not have Pat Beverly in our ownership rankings?
Let me take a look. Oh, he's there. He's coming at 18.9. This is 26 minutes ago.
Why is he not coming on? Somehow I have... Oh, I know what it is.
Maybe you're looking at DraftKings?
I got back to DraftKings, I'm sure. That would certainly make well more sense. All right, so
he's at 18.9.
And we have Fultz at
35.6.
Yeah. Fultz is the right playing cash, and at half ownership, I'm about ambivalent as far as them in a tournament. I do like Fultz better as a play, but again, double owned is a real thing. So depends on other guys you're correlating with, what games you're looking at. More often than not, I would stick with Fultz. But
yeah.
2 minutes and change. I'm getting back into the tweet deck just for any kind of late research. But
for sure. D'Anthony Melton was the nuts on the early slate.
I said that. I literally gave one piece of advice on the early slate. I gave like 2 pieces of advice. Someone asked about Kevin Knox too, but I literally said, by the way, I have a non-zero amount of D'Anthony Melton. I wrote that in chat. 1 for 1. I'm retiring undefeated on today's early slate.
Him and Tyus Jones both got 35 plus fantasy points here on Fanduel this morning.
Tyus must have been 80% owned, depending on the size of the slate. Like, it must have been a number.
It was a number.
I bet
Melton was point.
Yeah, what was Melton though?
There was a stat correction, and Melton felt it. Melton at 37 points at 0.8%. Tyus at 31%.
Oh, there's still money to be made. 0.8%. I bet Melton played. I have no idea. I literally have not seen anything from this game. I'm guessing Melton played 20 minutes, 21. At the floor.
His stat line is very, very impressive.
I bet he picked up
the stat line:
steals.
9, 8, and 7. He had 9 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block.
You go, boy. That's exciting. Get up and put your thing down.
All right. You want to hear my FanDuel lineup at lock?
Yeah, I think we're almost there. We're like a minute out, I think. Hold on, let me make sure I still have mine. I have one as well. So I will happily also share what no doubt will be the nuts. It's been a couple weeks for me. There was a bad time about 3 weeks ago where I was like, oh, I had the nuts again and couldn't play it. I had the nuts again, and like there was a pretty frustrating week. Although I'm gonna check. For those of you who don't know, Rinpack, my greatest Padawan, has had a couple monster days this year and qualified with his $10,000 ticket to the FanDuel Championship in Los Angeles in a few months. And I may go with him, as he is entitled to bring a +1. And FanDuel is hosting, I believe, what is a free contest for some significant prizes. And the +1 is supposed to get an entry into that. So I may, in theory, get to play in a DFS contest this year. In theory. 1, I have to ask, but I'm excited. I will put some research into that one, I can assure you.
Should be an exciting time. Very, very lucky that night. It was a single bullet and it just hit.
It's always.
But
luck is putting yourself. It's all about putting yourself in the position to get lucky. Like again, I come from the world of game design, and there's always, oh, you're so lucky to hit that shot. It's like, yeah, but I was skilled to be in the position to have any chance to make that shot. Oh, that guy was so lucky to top deck that card. It's like, yeah, but he had to play perfectly to live enough turns to get to that last card to hit his 1 in 42 to beat you. you're lucky, but you also are very smart and very good at what you do. So give yourself some credit.
All right. So my FanDuel lineup went. I went.
Find mine. Go ahead. We'll go back and forth here. Who are your? Do I have one?
Do you want to start? Do you want to start from point guard or center?
I go where you take me.
All right. Let's start at center. Let's switch things up.
Okay.
Where'd it go?
I have a feeling these are going to be the same. I have Thomas Bryant.
I do have Thomas Bryant as well.
Shocking. I have a feeling these, what mine are at the very least.
I went Birch and Gordon.
I have Birch and Gordon.
All right. I went Paul George and John Isaac.
I went Paul George and John Isaac. 5 for 5. By the way, for all you people out there who are like, oh, the pros are sharing lineups. First of all, that's not good for you. So most pros, not all, some are pretty goddamn daft, but most of them are smart enough they would not want to do that in a GPP format. But second of all, we're demonstrating how even having a conversation or watching the same show can lead people to the same conclusion, especially on a short slate. I bet we will differ here, though, but me and Rinpack completely independently, 5 for 5 the same. Here's where I have a feeling. I bet we are going to match exactly one of the last 4. What do you have it shooting?
Okay.
What do you have it shooting?
I went Lou Will, and Terrence Ross.
Yeah, I went Bradley Beal and Norman Powell.
Okay.
And at point guard,
I went Mike Conley and Fred VanVleet.
I was wrong. It's 0 for 4 of the last 4. I have Markelle Fultz and Kai Bowman. I like the ownership on a couple of those guys. Again, I think you're getting like both Bowman and Powell as like single-digit owned guys who you'd get some differentiation versus.
Yeah, I think it's just the LA hangover with Bradley Beal might get to.
Somebody told me I was completely wrong on Kem Birch. Let me go. I gotta go see what's Kem Birch owned. Apparently there was some pooch screwing, and that's good. I'm whenever the algorithm is correct and I'm wrong, that's good because that's what the algorithm is for. So it should be right relative to me most of the time.
Kem Birch is at 18.9% on FanDuel.
See, there you go. He was projected at 19 or 20, and I said no, it'll be closer to 30. Nope, right on the nose. Algorithm does that a lot. Nice job, algorithm. Tip of the cap, algorithm. Wrong all the time.
Yeah.
Doing the best I can, but wrong all the time.
How much is Norman Powell's ownership? Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm going to guess 9.
Let me find one.
Yeah, fine. That's right. It's FanDuel. You got to find one. I'm going 9. 9?
I haven't found one yet.
As the Germans say.
Oh, I found one. He's 13%.
Okay. I'll take it. That's still different enough. My lineup would have been pretty different, I would think. I got to go see if someone actually has the lineup I just described. I don't know how I would do that. Yeah, never mind. If it wins, I'll look at the top. That's the easiest way. Get it all right. All right, well, that was fun. That 2 hours went pretty quick. I think we learned a lot today. What did you learn today, Rempe?
I learned that our audience should sign up for a promo code starting at midnight tonight. So that's that should be their first thing. They should set an alarm at midnight. Sign up for the Awesemo promo code.
ABC.
Cyber Monday.
Always be closing. Always be closing. Sorry.
And that's what I learned. Other than that, it was fun. It was a fun 2-hour conversation on a split Sunday NFL.
That's a weird slate. They're like, yeah, what do you want to do? And I'm like, let me go look. What is this happy horse shit? I was like, so DraftKings biggest is 4 games and FanDuel's is 3, but they overlap 2. All right, sure.
And then
I did.
Yahoo locked all of their games earlier.
They just ran the whole day or whatever. They're like, screw it, 11 games at 3:00.
No, they locked at the same time as DraftKings, but included the Washington game.
That probably seems like the best option to me. I don't know. I really like that 4:00 game too. So you and I are not taking into account one of their big goals is to funnel everyone possible into the afternoon football games, which start at 4:25, I presume. Don't know that to be the case, but I presume that's the case. Ergo, they'd much rather have a 5 p.m. NBA slate than a 4 p.m. NBA slate, which doesn't distract people from the afternoon NFL slate, which is still substantial, and allows people to have almost certainly recovered their early NFL investment for use. So those are two things that math out there. So getting the Laker Mavericks game would have been nice, but 5 p.m. is probably the right decision. Including the late game or not is an interesting focus point. I think I would want it. It seems odd to me that it was eschewed by DraftKings and they decided not to run with it today, but you know, it's okay. Jake Puddle, 13 so far. That's fine. It's getting work done. Apparently somebody hit Blake Griffin in the newts.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's no joke. That right there. Anyhow, apparently I just hit 10,000 Twitter followers. I have been just informed.
Congratulations on the milestone.
I feel an inch taller. I can't, not many people are as loved and cherished as I am. And I can tell you it feels pretty great, Renpack, to be so loved and cherished that 10,000 people have clicked a button and not been annoyed enough at me or my content to have clicked another button since then. So it's all uphill from here, baby. Just adding zeros. So that first 10 only took what? 5 years or whatever since I made a Twitter account. So, at this rate, I'm going to be in like Barack Obama territory by the year 3000 or something. So on the way up. In fact, just joined Twitter September 2011. It's right in front of me. So pardon me. 8 years and 2 months and a little change to get there. So maybe we'll roll into that next one a little faster. We'll see how it goes. How many Twitter followers do you have, Rimpack? Because it should be more than I have, because you're a gentleman, a scholar, a man of wisdom and passion.
Speaking of wisdom, I lost 4 wisdom teeth earlier this week. So
you lost what?
I got 4 wisdom teeth taken out earlier this week.
I saw that, and it was like the day you won like $50,000. That was the best point.
Yeah.
Because hopefully I can say that on the show. I know you were kind of keeping it on the download, but everybody, Renback made like 50 grand this week on like 1 grand in entries and a single lineup.
Yeah, that happened with on all sorts of meds. So I was like, maybe.
And minus the wisdom teeth. So he had just tweeted somewhat humorously, I hope wisdom teeth out means more wisdom. And I responded with like, well, we've proven that. That clearly worked out. So make sure, I think the moral of the story is schedule your wisdom teeth extractions for days with substantial NBA slits.
Seems like a great correlation for me, and I hope it works out for other people as well.
100%. It's proven. It's fact, basically. I saw it on the internet. Anything you'd like to say to the boys and girls, our favorite chinjuros, before we take off for the evening, Rimpa?
No, it's been a pleasure. I hope everyone had a phenomenal holiday weekend with their family, and I hope someone takes on some big money tonight. Yeah, and again, keep in mind, anything I can do, show format, ordering of things, I constantly want to do a better job. So let me know. And that includes having more Rinpack. You don't like those other guys I have to host with? I know how you feel. Please have more Rinpack. Is an unappreciated national treasure. So with that, I am Fast Eddie Fear. Apparently you've already all followed me on Twitter. So best of luck in your contest.